Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode. Today's going to be one of those episodes where there's going to be a lot of myth debunking, fake lie propaganda exposing, and some more. Jordan Peterson yet again speaks with Bibi Netanyahu, and as usual, as with any pro-Zionist guest, you have a lot of lies, a lot of propaganda, a lot of fake history, and a lot of manipulation. And I'm going to address some of the key points that came in this interview and reveal the truth behind them. Number one, Jordan Peterson started by mentioning a sentence saying that, and he quoted like by common English law, and then I'll get to that in a second, that if you own a territory, a vast swathe of land, and do nothing with it, and someone comes and squats on it and spends a lot of time improving it, at some point they develop a valid legal claim to the property. Now he quoted, for some reason, English law. Not only is this completely false in English law, it's ignorant and wrong on three levels. Legal, from the legal perspective, from a historical perspective, and from a moral perspective. We'll start with the legal perspective. In English law, Jordan Peterson, it's illegal to be a squatter or a trespasser. You can be prosecuted or even jailed if you trespass someone's property, even if it's full of leaves and things you don't necessarily like, okay? Secondly, you're claiming that the Zionist gangs came to Palestine and no one was there. Now, not that it's only factually ignorant, it's historically, and the evidence on the land is the complete opposite. Palestine had many cities that were developed hundreds of years ago, like the city of Haifa is almost 300 years old. Ramla, Jaffa, some of the oldest ports in history were in Palestine and were well developed. Palestinian lands were being farmed regularly by Palestinian farm owners. Then obviously, because there was less population, you had more land available at that time. Similarly to any other place in the world. America, was it 300 million 100 years ago? No, of course not. So people inhabit the places, grow their families, and have more people, and you grow. So the notion that there was no one there is just absolutely ridiculous, to be honest with you. It's like none of these people have even read the history of Palestine. Secondly, if there was no one living there, then why did you have Plan Dalet? To remove Palestinian populations and replace them with Zionist immigrants. Why? Because there was no one there? And then you go to the moral claim of it. It's like, who do you think you are to claim a land based on what you do with it if you're a squatter or a trespasser? So someone owns a land, they don't want to do anything with it, they want to clear land. A Zionist gang member comes and squats on it and plants a seed, and hey presto, he has some legal claim. What kind of moral background are you basing that opinion upon exactly? So if you have your backyard and you're doing nothing with your backyard and it looks horrendous, and a squatter comes and starts planting trees, they can tomorrow claim that they legally own your backyard. What kind of a ridiculous proposition is this? Then you go to Bibi, who's trying desperately in this interview to use the Palestinian rhetoric to the Zionist side. Oh, the Arab conquerors came, they kicked us out, and we regained our land back. Oh, seriously? Oh, really? Number one, Palestine had many people living in it from all across the world. You had the Canaanites, Aramaic tribes, all sorts. Palestinians, the Romans conquered it, the Greeks, the Ottomans, lots of people lived in Palestine. No one kicked any Jew out of Palestine. Jewish people were living in Palestine for many years, some Jewish people. Not the Zionist immigrants that came later on, but historically, lots of Jewish people were based in Israel before Zionism even began. So no one kicked any Jewish person out of Palestine. That's historically incorrect. Secondly, Benjamin Netanyahu also quoted a couple of people from the 18th or 19th century saying that we came and we saw amazing landscapes and, you know, no one living in there. What kind of ridiculous claim is that? Again, people used to live, you had cities that were very much populated, but similarly to every other country and city and town across the globe, most places were less populated a long time ago. Does that mean the Zionist gangs came and they just established Israel and did nothing? Of course not. And then empty land. Probably after the mass ethnic cleansing campaign and mass demolitions of cities and towns, specifically 1,500 Palestinian villages that were completely wiped out, over 500 mosques demolished by Zionist gangs. If you mean by that swathe of land, then maybe yes, after the Zionist gangs demolished and annihilated Palestinian towns and villages, then probably yes. But apart from that, there is nothing historically correct about it whatsoever. As usual, complete nonsense fakery in a desperate attempt, to be honest with you. Then you have Bibi claiming that Arabs migrated and became Palestinians. Well, Bibi, if there's any chutzpah, which is rudeness in Hebrew, it's this chutzpah, in all honesty. Palestinians are mentioned from thousands of years ago. Palestine, which is the southern part of Palestine, stretching to parts of the West Bank, is thousands of years old. Palestine was referred to before any creation of Israel. Secondly, Arabs migrated and became Palestinians. Excuse me? Where did your grandfather immigrate from? Your grandfather is called Nathan Milekovsky, not even Netanyahu. He immigrated from Poland to Palestine to mandate Palestine, and he later changed his name to Netanyahu to be more Jewish. Similarly with Ben Gurion. Ben Gurion also immigrated from Poland, and he was born as David Grun. But again, Ben Gurion is more Jewish. We have another one. The second Israeli Prime Minister, Moshe Sharet. He was born in Kherson as Shertok. He changed his name. Who was born something and became something else? Another example, Levi Eshkol. Born in the Russian Empire, another previous Israeli Prime Minister, as Levi Shkolnik, and changed his name to Eshkol, emigrated to Ottoman Palestine. Yigal Alon was born as Yigal Pekowitz. He immigrated from Belarus in the beginning of the 20th century. Golda Meir was born in Kiev as Golda Mabovich, who migrated and became something they were not, Bibi. That's called chutzpah. Israel changed its name from Palestine. It was Palestine before it was Israel. It's like, it's obvious. Everyone knows that. And then you go back to the 3,500 year claim. I mean, I think everyone's bored of this by now, to be honest with you. 3,500 years ago. Sometimes you tell me 2,000, sometimes you tell me 3,000, and there's 3,500. Number one, you cannot prove any relation to anyone who was here 2, 3, and 4,000 years ago. That's number one. Number two, if you're talking about God's promise, okay? God's promise of the land, number one, doesn't mean your complete and whole ancestry owns the land. Secondly, it's very limited to your belief. Other people are entitled not to believe it. Thirdly, you cannot claim you cannot validate this actual claim by proving your DNA and your relation to anyone who was here 2,000 and 3,000 years ago. Also, if really and truly God promised you this land, well, how about the other people who live in this land? Did God not bring them to this land as well? And plus, if you go to your land that was promised by God, would that make you go against your other religious teaching? Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not covet, you shall not covet, sorry. When you do all of these things on a regular basis to promote your agenda and your propaganda, come on. Also, there were two nice moments in this interview that I'm gonna show you, these moments where Bibi talks about colonialism and stumbles, to say the least.
And now are being told you have no connections to it. You were, you're the colonials. No, we're not. We're not just to give this. Just to give us
No, you're not the colonialist. Yeah, of course you're not the colonialist. And then there's another moment where he mentions that we are the colonialists. The Palestinians are the colonialists. I mean, how much more ridiculous can you be? How much more ridiculous can you be? It's unbelievable. Listen to this.
Really, the colonials. That is something that I think has. It's not merely folly. It has something.
Yeah. That's
on fantasy attack on the Jewish people's right to live in the Jewish doesn't exist. Based on the Palestinians who want to destroy us, who support terrorism, who are anti-democratic, or or basically neo-colonials, because they're really the colonials. That is something that I think has. It's not merely folly. It has something fundamentally wrong morally, because it is both untrue and unjust.
We're the neo-colonialists, and it's untrue and it's unjust. Someone explained that to me. I just gave you historical facts of your grandfathers and of everyone who controlled Israel from its establishment up until now, that all of them immigrated, or their parents immigrated to Palestine from somewhere else, and that most of them changed their name to something else, and you're coming to tell me that I immigrated and I'm a colonialist in my own land. Are you being serious? I mean, the only place that I know any of my ancestors migrated to and from was within Palestine. My great-great-grandfather migrated from a small village next to Jerusalem called Na'lin, and he came to Haifa. That's our immigration. That's our colonialism. But your colonialism is from Europe. Your colonialism is from Belarus. Your colonialism is from Ukraine, previous Russian Empire, Hungary. That's your colonialism. And it was very recent as well. And then he talks about the ridiculous Abraham Accords, and that he's somehow a genius for kind of making the peace process with these countries, and he's saying that he made peace through power. What power? Do you think that those Arab governments that you made peace with didn't get anything from you? Number one, Israel constantly begs for recognition from all of the world. They just want someone to recognize them. Okay? So they beg the Arab countries constantly to recognize them. And then when these governments of these populations, of these countries, recognize them, they get what they want from Israel. Whether it's technology, specific knowledge, help with security, whatever it is. So it's not like Israel is imposing peace or whatever. It's a mutual thing with the government specifically, because you haven't made peace with the people. People will always dislike Israel because of what it does. People will always dislike Israeli policies as long as they oppress Palestinians. People will always dislike Israel because of the apartheid, because of the refugees, because of the constant killing of Palestinians on a regular basis. That's why people will never make peace with Israel unless Israel, by some miracle, gets back to its senses and gives the Palestinians their rights that they know they owe Palestinians. And I mean, this whole conversation is so ridiculous. I mean, imagine anyone for 1 second doubting that there are any Jewish people in the world. Imagine anyone doubting that Jews were persecuted in Europe. Imagine anyone denying the Holocaust. But yet you casually sit there, deny, and then admit that there are Palestinian people. And by the way, thank you, Bibi, for saying that Palestinian can live amongst us and next to us. Thank you very much for acknowledging that, because we really do need that. People who are born in their own land, they need someone who came from abroad to come and tell them that they can live in their own land. So I really do thank you for that. But the whole thing is just absolutely ridiculous. Also, another thing here. There's this holy connection with Israel, like Netanyahu and many Zionists claim. What about the connection to Mount Sinai? Mount Sinai is where the 10 Commandments were revealed. It's like Ghar Hira for Muslims, where Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, received his first revelation. Isn't that supposed to be the holiest place, or a place of significance? Yet, and after you occupied Sinai, you were kicked out of it, and now you have no mention of Sinai, despite the fact that it's very holy in Judaism, and many Jews consider Mount Sinai to be the holiest place in Judaism. So, why don't you talk about Sinai, for example? Or is it because you were forced out of Sinai? I also note how Jordan Peterson, all of a sudden, when he speaks to pro-Israeli and pro-Zionist figures, becomes this spineless, gutless individual who just, casually talks very, very politely and just asks for clarifications instead of questioning like harsh truths. This is the same person that called Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, a warlord. Yet he's spineless when it comes to Zionists. I mean, something like, why didn't you ask Benjamin Netanyahu why Israel killed over 127 Palestinians in the West Bank only this year? The UN say this will most likely be the deadliest year ever for Palestinians in the West Bank. Why don't you ask him something of the sort? Why didn't you mention to Netanyahu that in the last five wars in Israel, Israel killed over 4,500 Palestinians, and you know how many Israelis were killed? 160. Can you see the level of difference? And can you see who's more aggressive? And can you see who's the occupying force? Can't you see who commits more crimes against humanity? Why didn't you ask Benjamin Netanyahu about the apartheid regime in the West Bank, in Hebron specifically? Why didn't you ask him about that? He becomes completely spineless. And then Bibi goes on about promoting himself and his capitalist free market approach, saying that Israel was like socialist and whatever. Israel was always supported by the US. Israel was always supported by big money, by big capitalism. Do you know what I mean? Stop using this as a pathetic attempt to self-promote yourself in your newly recently formed or about to be formed government that includes the worst figures in Israeli politics. People who call for the mass expulsion of Palestinians. And you know exactly who I'm talking about. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich. Outright neo-Nazis who promote the expulsion of people from their land. They're in your government. Yet he doesn't see fit, Mr. Know-it-all, Jordan Peterson, to ask or challenge Bibi or any other Israeli figure about any of these hard facts on the ground that Israel commits. These harsh crimes, the mass killings, the ongoing criminality aspect, and the brutal side of Israel. And then Netanyahu goes and says, oh yeah, Israelis are traveling now to Bahrain and Emirates, and Jews and Arabs are dancing in the streets. Mate, it's not about Jews and Arabs dancing. Jews and Arabs have no problems with each other from a religious point of view. You can be a Jew, you can be an atheist, you can be a Muslim, you can be a non-believer and have great relationships. But you're talking about Israel as a state, even though many Israelis in Israel are victims of their state's policies and therefore pay the harsh price of these ongoing policies and the endless violent cycle. He says they go and dance together in the streets of Bahrain. Well, we saw what's happening in the Qatari World Cup. You saw Israeli journalists and what's happening to them. No one's speaking to them. Hardly anyone speaking to them. Neither Arab nor Western people. Hardly anyone speaking to them. Is that because they love Israel? It isn't about Jews and Arabs. It isn't about Jews and Muslims. It isn't about that. It's about violence, injustice, occupation, lies, manipulation, inequality, supremacy, racial discrimination, segregation, and the denial that people live in, and that there is a Palestinian cause, and that there are Palestinian people who still strive to get their rights and fight for their cause, despite the fact that it's almost 75 years since Israel's establishment and the Nakba. And that's it for today, guys. I mean, I had to let this out. My initial response to this video was really anger, to be honest with you. When someone denies your existence, when someone comes up with so many lies, so much manipulation and propaganda, and you have Jordan Peterson, who supposedly promotes values and ethics and all of this nonsense, all of a sudden becomes a spineless character who has no morals, no ethics whatsoever when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian cause. So I do hope I clarified a couple of things for you guys out there. If you do have any questions or require more information, do send me some comments below. I'd be more than happy to answer you. And I will see you hopefully soon in another episode. See you soon, guys.